The moment you try to be good, you've already surrendered power. Think about it. When someone disrespects you, manipulates you, or quietly undermines you, what is your first instinct? Do you try to stay kind? Do you try to be fair? Do you try to prove you have good intentions? That instinct is not virtue. It is conditioning, and it is destroying your position in the social hierarchy without you realizing it. Because in power dynamics, good is often interpreted as safe to use, harmless, predictable, and predictable men become pieces on someone else's board. In this video, you'll learn why being good alone keeps you weak and powerless, and how Machiavelli's logic exposes the hidden game behind human nature. You'll see the dark psychology behind why people test kind men, how manipulation tactics feed on moral hesitation, and how to shift into social dominance without becoming reckless or cruel. But there's something even darker about this. We'll get to that in a moment. In The Prince, Machiavelli revealed a reality that most people refuse to name. Society is not governed by fairness. It is governed by perception, leverage, and control. He did not write for saints. He wrote for men who wanted to survive in a world full of opportunists, predators, and rivals. Modern society hides this knowledge behind comforting slogans. Be nice, be good, be yourself. And those phrases sound noble until you watch what actually happens to the man who follows them without strategy, because the system rewards appearances, not intentions. Human nature respects strength, not innocence. The crowd praises kindness, then exploits it. The masses worship morality, then punish the man who enforces boundaries. This is the trap. Most people confuse good with respected. They confuse kind with valuable. They confuse harmless with trusted. But trust is not granted because you are good. Trust is granted because you have standards, consequences, and self-control. Machiavelli understood something that still controls every room today. People watch reactions more than words. They read emotional stability as power. They read hesitation as weakness. They read over-explaining as guilt. They read over-explaining as guilt. And they read moral pleading as permission to push further. The enlightened viewer sees what the masses deny. The world is not divided into good people and bad people. It is divided into players and pieces, those who understand the game and those who get moved by it. And here is the first open loop. Being good is not the problem. Being good alone without strategy is the problem, because goodness without leverage becomes a target. But there is an even darker layer. The more you try to prove you are good, the more you signal you fear being seen as bad. And that fear becomes the leash others pull. Everything you were taught about being a good man was the surface level. Here's what's really happening beneath it, and it starts with the first principle. Goodness without consequences creates contempt. The first law is brutal. People respect what has consequences. A man can be polite. A man can be calm. A man can even be generous. But if his kindness has no boundary, if his patience has no limit, human nature does something predictable. It escalates. It tests. It takes. This is dark psychology, not theory. The brain constantly maps risk and reward. If disrespect produces no cost, disrespect becomes a habit. If manipulation produces no consequence, manipulation becomes a strategy. If selfishness succeeds around you, people learn that you are a safe environment for selfishness. This is the power dynamic. The good man, who never punishes bad behavior, becomes the training ground for bad behavior. Now, most people think this is about becoming aggressive. It isn't. Aggression is unstable. It can be provoked. It can be baited. True social dominance is calm, clear consequence delivered without emotion. A concrete example exposes it. A man at work is known as nice. He covers shifts. He takes extra tasks. He avoids conflict. When a colleague misses deadlines, he fixes it quietly. When someone speaks over him, he smiles and moves on. He believes he's building goodwill. What he is building is a reputation. He will tolerate it. Soon, the manager gives him more without promotion. Co-workers dump problems on him. When credit is assigned, louder people claim it, and when he finally protests, they look confused as if his boundary is an unexpected betrayal. That is not because they are evil, that is because human nature adapts to what you allow. Machiavelli wrote that a ruler who relies on being loved without the ability to enforce order becomes fragile, not because love is useless, but because love is conditional. When circumstances change, the crowd abandons. What remains is the ability to command respect through structure. So the tactical shift is simple. First, stop rewarding disrespect with engagement. When someone crosses a line, reduce attention, reduce warmth, reduce access. Attention is currency. Remove it. Second, state boundaries once, calmly, without debate. Long debates invite frame control battles. Short boundaries signal authority. Third, enforce consequences quietly, not dramatic punishment, not revenge, just removal of access, removal of favors, removal of special treatment. Here's what they don't tell you. The strongest consequence is not what you do to someone, it's what you stop doing for them. Now, most people stop here, but that's why they fail. There's a second layer, because once you add consequences, people will attempt a new weapon, moral pressure. The masses use morality as a control system. The second law is darker. People weaponize goodness to control those who fear appearing bad. This is where manipulation tactics become subtle. A man enforces a boundary and suddenly he is labeled cold, arrogant, difficult, changed. The crowd does not argue with his logic. The crowd attacks his identity. Why? Because identity attacks bypass reason. Human nature prefers shortcuts. If someone can make you feel guilty for enforcing standards, they don't need to respect you. They can shame you back into obedience. This is how the system protects itself. It does not punish weakness. It punishes deviation. It punishes the man who stops being useful. Machiavelli revealed that appearances matter because the masses judge by outcomes and images, not internal intentions. A man who tries to prove he is good becomes trapped in public opinion. He becomes dependent on external permission. And dependence is not goodness, it is servitude. A story makes this undeniable. A man in a relationship gives endlessly. He listens, he forgives, he accommodates. He avoids conflict because he believes love requires self-sacrifice. Then one day he says no. He refuses disrespect. He refuses emotional chaos. He refuses unfair demands. Immediately the partner reframes him. You're not the man I fell in love with. You're being selfish. You're cruel. Not because he is cruel, but because the old arrangement benefited someone else. This is frame control. It is an attempt to redefine your boundary as wrongdoing. The powerful understand the rule. If you need to be seen as good by everyone, you will be controlled by anyone. If you're still watching, you're already ahead of 90% who clicked away because this makes them uncomfortable. Because it exposes how often morality is used as a leash. So what is the tactical response? First, detach from the need to explain your boundaries. Explanation invites negotiation. Negotiation invites pressure. Pressure invites collapse. Second, measure actions, not labels. When someone calls you selfish, ask one question. What standard did I violate? If none exists, it is not ethics. It is control. Third, accept that some people require your weakness to feel safe. When you become stronger, they will call it darkness. That is not your problem. That is their dependency. But the next principle is where it gets truly dangerous, because it explains why being good becomes weakness even when you have boundaries. If you still crave approval, neediness is the real weakness, not kindness. Now, most people think weakness is being kind. That is incorrect. Weakness is being kind because you're afraid of conflict. Weakness is being generous because you're afraid of rejection. Weakness is being patient because you're afraid of being seen as hard. That is neediness, and neediness is the scent predator's track. This is dark psychology in its simplest form. The social hierarchy ranks those who can walk away above those who must stay. The man who needs approval cannot walk away. So he negotiates with disrespect. He bargains with manipulation. He tolerates what he should end. Machiavelli wrote about fear and love, not as emotions but as control mechanisms. If a ruler relies on love alone, he becomes dependent. If he relies on fear alone, he becomes hated and unstable. The strategic path is controlled respect, predictable fairness with clear consequences. In modern life, the same principle applies. Your goodness becomes weakness the moment it becomes a strategy to be liked. Look at how weak people behave. They rush to prove intentions. They over-explain. They apologize for boundaries. They stay in environments that drain them because they fear loneliness. They offer access to those who haven't earned it. Powerful people do the opposite. They speak less. They let actions prove value. They enforce standards without emotion. They choose solitude over humiliation. They treat access as earned, not owed. This is where you need to be careful. Because some men hear this and become hostile. They become cold for performance. They try to imitate power through cruelty. That creates enemies. It creates instability. It creates instability. It creates a reputation of weakness disguised as aggression. Real power is disciplined. It is calm. It is selective. So how does the viewer apply this without becoming reckless? First, remove approval-seeking behaviors. Stop fishing for reassurance after you speak. Stop checking if people agree. Stop adjusting your truth to reduce tension. Second, practice controlled disagreement. Say what you mean without raising your voice. Let silence follow. Silence forces others to sit with your reality. Third, build a life where you can walk away. Financial discipline, physical discipline, social discipline. Dependence is the root of fear. Reduce dependence and your presence changes. But knowing these isn't enough. You need to understand how they combine, because the final principle integrates them into something most people cannot handle. The forbidden law. Become good by choice, not by default. This is forbidden knowledge because it destroys the identity many men cling to. Most men are good because they are afraid to be anything else. They lack power, so they call it virtue. They lack leverage, so they call it kindness. They lack the ability to enforce standards, so they call it peace. That is not morality. That is impotence. The most dangerous man is not the cruel man. The most dangerous man is the man who could be cruel, but chooses restraint because he is in control. Why? Because choice signals power. Default signals weakness. This is why Stoicism matters here. Stoicism teaches self-mastery. Stoicism teaches self-mastery, not submission, not passivity, self-mastery. The ability to feel anger and not be owned by it. The ability to see disrespect and not explode. The ability to enforce boundaries without chaos. This integrates everything. Consequences create respect. Moral pressure is a control tactic. Neediness is the real weakness. And the final step is choice. The ability to be firm without hatred, quiet without fear, and good without being used. And here's what Machiavelli never explicitly wrote but understood. The strongest position is to appear fair while remaining unbribable. To be calm while remaining dangerous. To be generous while remaining impossible to exploit. That is the aura of controlled power. That is what the masses cannot imitate because it requires inner discipline, not performance. The final law is the most dangerous because once you master it, there's no going back. Now the system is clear. Principle 1 establishes consequences. Without consequences, your goodness becomes permission. Principle 2 exposes moral pressure. The masses will attempt to shame you back into usefulness. You refuse the frame. Principle 3 removes neediness. When you stop needing approval, your kindness becomes strength instead of fear. Principle 4 completes the transformation. You become good by choice, not by default. You become controlled, not harmless. Disciplined, not passive. Now, some will say this is manipulation, but power doesn't care about labels. The world runs on power dynamics whether the masses admit it or not. Every room has a social hierarchy. Every relationship has leverage. Every workplace has frame control battles happening silently. The question is not whether these dynamics exist. The question is whether you will be conscious or unconscious inside them. The world is divided into players and pieces. Which one will you be? Because the piece is always good in the way the system demands. The player is good on his own terms because he has standards and consequences. But before implementation, understand this pattern break. Most men don't fail because they lack knowledge. They fail because they lack the courage to disappoint people who benefited from their weakness. Start today. First, choose one boundary you've been avoiding, one line you keep letting people cross. Decide the consequence. Keep it simple: reduced access, reduced help, reduced attention. Second, remove one approval-seeking habit. Stop explaining your decisions to people who aren't responsible for your life. Speak in conclusions. Let discomfort exist. Third, practice calm refusal. One clean no this week. No extra paragraphs, no emotional defense. A steady voice, a steady face. Fourth, build independence. Strengthen what makes you unbuyable. Discipline with money, discipline with time, discipline with sleep, discipline with training. Dependence creates fear. Reduce dependence. Fifth, adopt stoic control under pressure. When provoked, pause. When insulted, observe. When shamed, ask, what standard did I violate? If none exists, it's manipulation tactics. You refuse. You now know what 99% of people will never understand. Kindness is only power when it is backed by consequence and choice. This is the transformation. You stop being good as a survival strategy. You become disciplined as a power strategy. You stop donating access to people who haven't earned it. You stop letting moral pressure control your behavior. You become calm, selective, and unmovable. Most people will watch this and do nothing. That's why they stay powerless. They consume hard truths like entertainment, then return to the same patterns that keep them weak. But if this resonates with the part of you that's tired of performing for others' approval, you know what to do. Subscribe, because this channel is built for those who use knowledge as a weapon, not as comfort. The choice is yours, but remember, ignorance is not bliss, it's slavery.